My name is Christian Denzin. I'm the country director of Friedrich-Ebert Foundation in Tanzania, and at the same time I'm the coordinator of Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung's regional project on the Just City, in which we collaborate with all our African offices on the topic of just urbanization. And for me it is a great pleasure to be here again. We have been participating heavily and involved heavily in the first African Urban Forum in Addis Ababa 2 years ago, which was for us, and I think for many of our counterparts, a very important event and a very good cooperation with the African Union and UN Habitat at the same time. So therefore I want to thank especially UN Habitat and the African Union, but also the Kenyan government for the cooperation in the making of the second African Urban Forum. And we are really grateful to be able to host this side event as well as another side event on Friday afternoon on financing urban infrastructure development. I think the Africa Urban Forum is a unique opportunity for a broad discussion of urban transformation and its challenges. In fact, it is one of the very few, if not the only, one event by inter or supranational organizations which opens its doors to such a big community of civil society organizations, think tanks, and other associations. As I mentioned, we have been cooperating with UN Habitat and the African Union on the previous African Urban Forum, but as well as in the political debates on the urban transformation in the African context. FES has used its networks to facilitate exchange on the regional level between local initiatives who focus on housing policies, on transport policies, and who are all have in common that they want to influence the national debates, the national policies in various sectors. For FES as a social democratic foundation, it is crucial that those voices who are out of the expert discourses or the technical expertise, but who represent a vast majority of the African people, are included in the debates on just urban transformation. As it has been stated very clearly in the background paper of this summit, Africa is undergoing a rapid and unprecedented urban transition. Its urban population is likely to double from 700 million today to 1.4 billion by 2050, with 65% of Africans living in cities. So far, policies and urban infrastructure do not keep pace with this growth and the numerous challenges that come along with it. Yet, from our point of view, urban growth does not have to come at the cost of dignity. Given the trends and the challenges of rapid urbanization on the continent, we are convinced that politicians, institutions, and policies need to adhere to a number of guiding principles when identifying the very concrete challenges and the solutions in the lives of urban residents, especially of informal workers and other vulnerable groups. From our point of view, these principles should be democracy and participation, dignity and accessibility and affordability, diversity, equity and inclusion, public safety, and of course, sustainability. Adhering to these principles ensures that all residents and workers have access to public goods and services, such as decent housing and transport, amongst many others, and that they are given the opportunity to co-shape the transformation that is urgently needed in a way that benefits them directly. This is what we are referring to as a just city. Justice, in this context, isn't just a concept, it is an aspiration and at the same time part of the daily experiences that shape our lives. As the principal theme of the second African Urban Forum, as adequate housing for all, we want to open the debate today with this roundtable discussion on the challenges of just housing policies in Africa, taking a closer look at different initiatives from Tanzania, Zambia, Kenya, and Uganda. Considering that our time is already ahead of the schedule, please allow me to introduce Magdalena George, who's our moderator today. Welcome, Magdalena. We are very grateful to have you here. Magdalena is a National Director of Habitat for Humanity Tanzania, a position which allows her to promote affordable and inclusive housing solutions in Tanzania. In this function, she also became part of the Just City platform, a network of CSOs and think tanks that strive to promote affordable housing and a national housing policy in Tanzania. She has a vast experience in working with international and local organizations and holds an MSc in development policy and practice for community development. Magdalena, I welcome you to the stage and hand over to you. Thanks to all of you for joining us in this debate. I'm looking forward to the exchange and your contributions. Asante sana.
So I'm so happy to save you today in this moment, as we have already get the introduction of myself, but also the general session. So glad and so excited to invite my panelists to come forward so that we save time. Karibu sana, Madam Grace, Dorothy, Emmanuel, Mr. Churchill, welcome in front of us. So while they are coming, I'll just welcome you to be very active. I know you came here to just not to listen, but also to contribute. So we'll try our best, despite we are behind time, at least to have even 10 minutes to hear from you. So please prepare in advance and feel free to contribute, to ask questions, and whatever you think that will help our discussion to be to bear fruits in the end. Tafadhali, you are welcome. At this moment, let me take time to welcome the panelists to introduce themselves, just in a brief, because we have they have different background. We have people who are experts working on the issue related to informal settlement, but also rent related issues, rent to own. We have youth who are coming up, and we know that they are the one that will deal with these housing issues we are speaking about tomorrow. But also we have people expert in habitat-related issues. So I want them to introduce themselves. Just 1 minute, introduce yourself, and pass the mic to the next person, and then we'll proceed. Karibu. Anyway, you can start your
I see Magdalene is looking at me, so... Thank you, Magdalene. Good afternoon, friends, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Churchill Otieno, a digital journalist with the Eastern Africa Internet Society and a member of the Just City Working Group in Kenya. Very, very happy to be here and willing to share in this critical topic.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Shikumwamtonga. I am the Executive Director for Civic Forum on Housing and Habitat Zambia, and I am the current President for Habitat International Coalition. My specialty actually spans from finance, auditing, as well as programming, research, and advocacy. I'm so glad to be here, and I also work with First Zambia on the Just Cities project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. That was such an introduction. I don't know if I can stand the heat. Hello, everyone. My name is Dorothy Baziwe, and I'm from Uganda. I work with Shelter and Settlements Alternative, and I am the convener of the Urban Informality Working Group in Uganda by FES. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Emmanuel, over to you.
Hello, I'm Emmanuel Njavike. I work part of the Just City platform in Tanzania, and an initiative that brings together stakeholders. I'm trained as a valuer in Tanzania, also working with the board, the Value Legislation Board of Tanzania. I'm running a small consultancy firm called Hello Africa Consultants. We're also an initiative think tank for young people called Housing Laboratory, experiment things related to housing. And I'm good and happy to be here. Thanks to AFES for this platform. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. I like the think tank. We have the digital. So you can see we have the, anyway, let me end here. So our topic is all about toward just housing policy in Africa, and we know the theme for this conference is about adequate housing for all. So before we go to housing policy, why housing policy? So there are a lot of housing issues that are very critical and make people to think we need the policy. And why do we need the policy? Because maybe the policy will stand as a guide, or because it has worked somewhere else. So these panels will tell us more, and you are also welcome to tell us about the need of having housing policy, or if it has worked anywhere, please, you are welcome. But I just want to highlight a little bit about why do we need that, and are there any issues? I know we know, and since morning we have heard about the issues, housing-related challenges. Even residence director from FES have mentioned a little bit about the need. He has mentioned some data here. So just to highlight, there are a lot of critical housing challenges that are existing in Africa and in specific countries that we are coming from. So most of them look similar. They can be similar but not the same, but they are similar. So some of them is all about the informal settlement. So you find in Africa about 1.1 billion people lives in slums. And you know, when there are people there, and we know that it was intended before, it was not intended before people to live in the slum area, meaning there are a lot of issues can happen, including the inequalities, insecurities, so things like that. But also you have heard what the resident director has said about the Justice City principles, including the diversity issues, the inclusion issues. So when we are speaking about this challenge of informal settlement and the way people are experiencing the inequalities, the issue related to diversity, the issue related to social justice, so we can also think and agree or maybe disagree that do we need the housing policy? And for those who have the housing policy, what the housing policy has done so far. So another challenge is all about housing finance. So this is something which is very critical, and we find that there are different models regarding housing finance, and we have heard since morning. So what is all housing finance? When we speak about mortgages, are they affordable? This is one among the principles of Justice City, but also we know many people are coming from low income category. Are these mortgages, are these housing finance models affordable to all? So if not, the policy will help it be affordable. What can be done? So here is the discussion. We can also go around that in this session. So there is this informal settlement, there is housing finance, and we can also speak about not only the mortgage, the rent to own. We have Mr. Churchill here. We'll speak about a little bit about that. So we are speaking about youth. Are youth able to afford the houses? Currently, you can find that very few number of youth can afford, can own. Even having access to and own to houses is something which is a very big challenge. Anyway, I don't want to go deeper, and I want to allow my panelists to at least go around the challenges and see on how we can have at least a solution, even if we are not sure that it is going to work now, but at least we have the opinion that will contribute to Agenda 2063. So I'll start with Emmanuel Njavike. Mr. Emmanuel, stand-alone housing policy in Africa began about 60 plus decades ago, since 1960. Then 1990, we had encountered a generation of housing policy formulation as a framework taking shape in a currently we are in focused policy development. In 2020 and 2021, around 16 African countries passed the housing-related policy and laws. So taking example of Tanzania, what do you tell us about housing policy? Do we need a standalone housing policy? If we need it, how will it address some of the challenges that are existing in Tanzania? What about the 16 African countries that have already developed the policies and laws related to that? Is it working or not? What lesson can we draw from there? So just go into details about that, but you have only 6 minutes. Karibu.
Thank you very much. A bit of caveat, since I'm the first person to speak, if there's anything wrong with my thing, the rest of the team will definitely correct. But I really appreciate this chance, and I think you put it very well in terms of the policy. To answer your question straight, we definitely need a standalone housing policy. We need a standalone housing policy. And I think I'll give reference from the Tanzanian side, where we used to have a housing policy, but then they changed it to settlement policy with justifications, but then we also had land policy. So when you put housing policy as first, we need a policy. That's the first stage. We need a policy. But we are going a step further to say we need a standalone housing policy. And the reason is currently, and I'll give a reference from Tanzania, the land policies is actually shadowing the housing policy. So it's like the housing policy is within the land policy. And this has created so many chaos because the thinking has been land, access to land, access to land, access to land. But the developments you can do on the land are left aside. And back in the days, in 1990s, you would not have that as a serious problem because the urbanization was not that much higher. The renting was not really an issue. The number of people renting was not that higher. But now we are talking about vertical growth. Now, if you look at the structure of local governments in Tanzania, you have a land officer. You don't have a housing officer. And I think that the thinking is worked then, but now it's no longer working because you need to think beyond titling, beyond surveying, beyond planning. We need to think, how do you develop? And that's why you need, that's why you have the so-called housing policy. So I think we need a mindset change, and the time is now to understand that when you talk about housing policy, you're thinking, it's a way of quantifying efforts. If I can ask you today, in Tanzania, what's a shortage of housing, they'll give you a figure, 3 million housing shortage, that's a number. 3 million units, that's a demand, and that number is increasing by almost 300,000 annually. Now, the big players in national, in provision of housing, the known players are National Housing Corporation and pension funds. I'll ask the same question: how many houses are being produced by the National Housing Policy annually? I'm trying to see if we have Tanzanian in the house so that they don't refuse me to go back home, but the number is very minimal. Actually, it's less than, out of 300,000 demand annually, the number is less than 10,000. That's the number that the National Housing can produce annually, less than 10,000. Now, those are the big players. Now, if you look at the other side of the coin, you have the incremental builders, the regular mwananchi, the local fundis, those who have no idea what a built environment university looks like. and the one getting things done. So out of more than 90% of the housing stock in Tanzania is actually being contributed by the incremental approach. These people, even the term financing is a terminology to them. The term mortgage is a terminology to them. So when you have a standalone housing policy, it's a policy. It will be a way for us to police ourselves, who is doing what. We have a national housing corporation that, if you ask me, it's actually a national real estate corporation, because you don't have a policy. And if you ask them, they'll be very blunt, like we are supposed to pay tax like everyone else. We don't have a guidance. So when you have a standalone housing policy, you're able to differentiate, to draw a line. What is real estate? What is residential real estate? What is housing? The confusion we have now is they're all in one bucket. That's why I emphasize we need a standalone housing policy so that we can police ourselves on how we achieve affordable housing for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel Njavike. I'm so happy I hear a lot from you. I have heard about housing is more than titling, it's more than survey. So having a standalone housing policy will help us to expound the concept, but also to touch different things. At Habitat for Humanity, we used to say housing is more than four walls. So we need to define it clearly and to see the need. It's all about wash, the basic service. It's all about land, yes, and others. So thank you so much for the contribution. I'm going back to Grace Chikumo from Zambia. Madam Grace, let me take you back to the previous General Secretary of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, once said, sustainable development cannot be achieved without adequate financing, inclusive policies, and meaningful participation of communities in decision-making. Kindly expound this statement as you tell us on the participatory national housing programs and financing innovation that you have seen both in Zambia and Africa at large.
Thank you so much for that question. So to start with, when we talk about participatory national housing programming, this is programming that is not just done by people that sit in a conference facility or in a boardroom. We are talking about involving the communities. So historically, when you look at Zambia, the housing situation of Zambia, so before independence, most of the housing units were actually being built by the farmer settlers. And then we had moved on post-independence. We had housing that was actually being provided by the mining institutions. And if there are Zambians in here, this is where you get the term called location. So location was an area where they actually built housing units for the people that were working in the mines. And along the way, they did demand for improved housing units. Now, from there, we saw now the aspect of the market-oriented kind of approach to housing delivery. You will agree with me that 1996, Zambia produced the best national housing policy, and this is the same policy that was actually adopted by many countries, including Botswana and South Africa. They did borrow some of the ideas from the Zambian national housing policy. So currently, in terms of implementation, and Africa seems to share a lot of problems, the very exact details that Tanzania has provided are the same details that are at play in Zambia. We've had very good policies, but in terms of housing delivery, there has been a very dismal amount of housing that has been delivered based on the targets that have been set in the policies. Now, coming back to the national housing program that is being developed, and I would want to actually just extend once more my sincere gratitude to the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung Zambian team, because they've really coordinated this process very well. So this process has actually brought together the different community representatives who actually experience the challenges. And I've always said, don't make decisions in boardrooms. Go back to the communities I believe in indigenous knowledge. Remember that people existed before we existed. And if they existed, there is need to actually tap into this indigenous knowledge. So we've had consultations and we've tried to look at what really will constitute a fair and inclusive national housing policy. This basically means we don't throw away the knowledge that is currently there. So there will be need to review the 2020 to 2024 national housing policy. There will also be need to look at the realities on the ground. Because remember, communities continue to transform all the time. So we need to take account of what data is available. We need also to look at what kind of bulk services are required. The kind of chaos that we continue to see across the African continent is because actually development has gone ahead of planning. So we need to ensure that our authorities are able to do adequate planning to ensure that services are actually provided. Coming to the aspect of financing, yes, we have seen a drift of most national government policies moving towards public-private partnerships. But the question is, does public-private partnership work for social housing? So we need a deliberate involvement of the national governments with regards to providing financing that would make sure that there is social housing that is being developed. And when you look across sub-Saharan Africa, most of the capital cities are construction sites, housing coming up. But then this is housing for middle income earners. So we need to ensure that the financing is also targeting the low income earners, and governments, national governments, need to take a deliberate step to ensure that there is financing for housing that is inclusive for all.
Wow. Thank you so much, Madam Grace. She has said very well when it comes to participation. Grassroots participation, which is missing in different ways and in different aspects. So when it comes to housing, if we want it to be practical, the participation should be a priority. Taking back to what Emmanuel was saying about incremental building, this is what our community members does. So if they are not included in any decision making, she says the decisions that are made in the boardroom. I like that. So we need to ensure that we include them. So this is what she was emphasizing. But also about the financing, I capture something very strong about the government to take lead on that, and not to leave to anyone else. So the government need to prioritize the financing. They need to think of which kind of model will help even the low income earners, and not to think at this high level only. So thank you so much for that contribution. So I'm going direct to Mr. Churchill. There was a report I come across when I was reading. So there's a report I come across that was documented in 2019, titled Rental Housing in Africa. On the website of Housing and Finance Africa, which it provided some data from 6 African countries, including Kenya and Tanzania. The data stated that 80% of urban households in Nairobi, Kenya, rent their dwelling. In my country, myself as Tanzania, 55%. Household in Dar es Salaam alone rent. Kindly deep dive on rental housing debate and integration of informality now in Kenya, while shaping its national housing policy, integrate informal settlement and collaboration with the non-formal actors such as civil society and the public sector. You dive down, but in 6 minutes. Karibu.
Asante, thank you, Magdalena. Very, very interesting that we should be talking about housing in the year 2026. Flowing from our colleague from FES's very core contribution, that dignity at the end of the day must be central to all that we do. But when you look at Nairobi, Kenyan urban areas, and even when you go to other African urban areas, I think it becomes very, very plain that if we are frank, Africa is no longer failing to build houses. Yeah, that probably used to be the case, but maybe not anymore. Something seems to have shifted. What seems to be happening, if you ask me, is when you take housing in context, when you step one or two away from the house and look at the space around that house, many times you begin to see the shape of a city, at different levels of development, but by and large, increasingly a city, housing within a city. So it seems that over time, if you look at history, there's been some momentum. We now have some programs that address the question of housing, as the two speakers have eloquently put forward. We have questions around financing, us trying to figure out how might we pay for these houses to happen. More importantly, amongst the political class, there seems to be a recognition. The housing as an issue is getting attention. More so in Kenya, is a fairly big political issue. And when you go to many cities, there are those of us who are willing to show you changing skylines of huge projects coming across. So clearly, effort is not an issue anymore. Effort is not. If you ask me, alignment is, especially if you draw from dignity. Why do I say so? Three things. One you've mentioned, which is informality. In almost every single African city that you go to, you find markedly different neighborhoods. Some fairly well set up, well developed, well organized. Others maybe not so. And if you speak to any dweller in that city, they'll quickly point you which direction, which shape of housing there is. That seems to invite us to recognize the reality that informality is our second nature. Yeah, that whatever we do, informality is inbuilt, is just the way we are. And if you look at the statistics that have been thrown here, 70% of Nairobi housing is informal. Yeah. If I go to almost every other single African city, the majority of houses, of dwellers in those cities live in informal setups. So that seems to invite us to recognize using policy not to fight informality, but how might we, adjust, configure our policies to recognize that we're informal and see how then to ensure that there's dignity, decency, and safety in that kind of a housing. So in short, what I'm saying there is that we shouldn't necessarily upgrade, because sometimes, depending on how you approach upgrading, you end up displacing. You end up pushing people out. We shouldn't necessarily formalize, without humanity, because when you do that, you end up excluding, and sometimes you exclude quite a few people. Sometimes we end up building better structures, but as we bring forth better structures, we kill or we destroy the affordable systems that sometimes should provide these things. The second issue that I'd like to talk to goes to rental as a deliverer of housing. Many of our policies in Kenya, but also in many African countries today, seem to suggest that ownership is a core part of the solution when it comes to housing. So a lot of them, if you ask me, put a disproportionately more effort, more focus on how might we get people to own houses. But when you look at many of our communities, traditionally, culturally, they were migrant. So the concept of owning shelter is a new concept. It's not at the core part of us. So if you go back to designing for us the way we are, then maybe ownership should not be made as central as currently it is being made. And therefore, the minute you begin to accept that, then the priority of rentals then shifts. Yeah? And we begin asking ourselves, what systems can we deploy that enables rentals to be available in a way that is accessible to the different social strata in our cities? The third and last point is the whole question around inclusion. when you go to participation, because that tension between ownership and rental, the tension between informality and the formal setups suggests that we are not talking to the people whom we are trying to house. Because if we are talking to them, if their ideas are being brought on board, then those ideas will quickly begin to tell us what kind of systems would work for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I picked some statements, I can say, or some words. You spoke about effort is not an issue anymore, but the alignment. This is something pending. If we could have more time, we could deep dive on that. But also, we shouldn't necessarily think of upgrading. There are other ways as well. And also, the issue of ownership. I like that, but also seem to be pending. I had a lot of questions. Let's give time to Madam Doroth so that we can have some time to discuss. Karibu sana, Madam Doroth. I have a question for you. As you give us the current situation in Uganda, on how it recognizes informality and governance reforms in its housing agenda, how well it is strategically made to improve tenure security, service delivery, and financing options with inclusion of women, youth, and informal workers. I'll appreciate if you use 6 minutes so that we have a few minutes for the plenary.
I will try. I make no promises. So, about Uganda, I think the first thing that I will say is the realization that informality is not necessarily all illegal and bad and needs to be thrown out. Informality is actually a sign that the formal systems have errors. The formal systems are not responsive to the needs of the people who are settled there. Some of the challenges that we have in Uganda's informal settlements, the first big challenge that is everywhere, that I've heard all the previous speakers speak about, is the land tenure. In informal settlements, there is, for example, in Kampala, we have a very complex land system where you have multiple layers of rights and claims. And this will leave the informal settlement dweller without any security of tenure, and being unsure of their security of tenure, they are not willing to invest in their housing, because they know at any time they are prone to evictions, at any time they're prone to environmental challenges, and this is what builds the informality. Another challenge that we see in Kampala, for example, we have the self-build that Emmanuel talked about. When you have a self-build with these contractors who do not know the terminologies that the engineers use, that the architects use, that even those who are making the plans use, then you have a problem. And when there are the massive collection of service providers, you have a problem. And also, I want to include the infrastructure and service delivery. You can imagine in a place of self-build how it is supposed to be facilitated by roads, facilitated by water, facilitated by solid waste management, facilitated by sanitation units. This becomes a very big challenge. So we find ourselves grappling with overcrowding, we find ourselves grappling with lack of privacy, we find ourselves grappling with a disparity between incomes, because some people have, some people don't, but they're all in the informal settlements. As Churchill has said, you find that a lot of the settlements in our different cities and towns end up being informal because of these challenges. And it is a clear highlight that the formal systems have challenges. Uganda has very good policies. And I'd like to say that, for the record, for the Ugandans that are in the room, we have very good policies. We have a housing policy, we have an urban policy, we have national planning standards. We have a national building review board. We have all the structures in place. However, this is challenged by those many mandates. Now you come to the person in the informal settlement and you're telling them that they are supposed to put their house in a certain way and supposed to service it with certain infrastructure, and they have no idea where to go. These officers are far removed from them. This is because the informal settlement dwellers either have a bad experience with the formal systems or they have a negative perception.
1 minute.
This brings in, I will try. This brings in the need for recognition of the informality as it is. As Churchill said, we do not need to upgrade it. We need to constantly work with informality to reorganize, to assess their situation. Because we have a slogan in Uganda where the slum dwellers say, we are the problem and we are the solution. This means the solutions will come from the grassroots. But we also recognize that the need for policy is there. And that is why FES has a platform for convening both the local, the bottom-up approach as well as the top-up, so that we can dialogue and ensure that our policies are inclusive and participatory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Dorothy. I like the way you have ended up because I wanted to ask you a question. Do we need a police or what? So, but the way I have heard almost all of you, you are also bringing something which is very critical. We need also to think of the system. So how the police will help the system or how the system will help the police, that's another thing. Thank you so much for your contribution. We have some few minutes. Please, karibu, if you have any question or any comments. Someone to help me?
Yes, congratulations, the panel. And congratulations for your contribution. My name is Bogoa Githaiga. I work for an organization called Mau Governing Council of Kenya. Mau Governing Council of Kenya is an umbrella body organization that is including those who liberated us, those who are interested in that, and those organizations that were concerned particularly on values. Secondly, on that etiquette of unity for posterity, to achieve prosperity, so that my father could die, for me just to have a wonderful try, live a wonderful life, and enjoy even the city. As I address Churchill, I'm proud of what you have just made it plainly. Here we are in the Republic. When we are finding a scenario that we are calling them, those houses are going to be affordable. When are those houses affordable for somebody who is also in that informal? You've been around when the government attempted to come up with a policy, particularly there in Kibera, where I know you are quite informed. When those policies...
30 seconds.
Wow, thank you. I'll be very brief on this one again. Within the framework of financial sustainability, when you talk about making affordable housing sustainable with this nature of taxation and lack of financing and the dangers of economic handicaps we are going through, at what level now will this house sustainability will be able to be an ability where we are in a enable? An inability, as we are talking of now, the economic handicaps can't allow. Finally, on those organizations, particularly on the civil society, on the justice, on justice.
Thank you
Allow
so
me
much.
to mention one word.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think Mr. Churchill has will respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Try to be brief. We have only 3 minutes left.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Farai Shumba from Habitat for Humanity Zambia. I just have one destabilizing question for the panelists and the other people in the room. I think much has been said about policies, right? So I just wanted to ask, should our efforts really be exerted towards policies? Because from what we've heard from, I think, the Uganda case, from the Zambia case, we do have policies, but they're not being implemented. So should we really be exerting efforts on policies, or rather, should we be looking at the issues to do with system strengthening? Because if you don't have robust systems, especially at the implementation level, for example, at the local government level, to deliver what is in the policy, you have this 5-year policy, which will just so much, the resources are put and you don't have any output at the end of the day. So I just thought of just throwing that. Should we really be focusing on policy or system? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just 1 second, Churchill, and then anyone from the panel.
Thank you. I'll respond quickly. My brother is gone. Okay. He's gone, so I'm not sure whether, yeah. But just to say broadly, the lived reality is informality and is renting. So if we avoid the detail and some of the, experiences for a minute, I think broadly, that's for me the takeaway. And speaking to my brother's comment here, I don't think we can do without any of the two. It's a question of how do we then balance? How do you make sure that policy is oriented to the lived reality, which is informal, which is rental? And then how then do you make sure there are systems to help achieve those policies? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have system and policy. Go directly to their response.
Coming from Zambia and the Zambian side, so basically I think, Farai, you've actually put it so well. So what we actually have, it's not the absence of policies, but most of the challenges that we are facing are systemic challenges. So I think in terms of exerting efforts, of course we are no longer lobbying for inclusive policies, but now we are at a stage where we need to lobby for system changes. We need to make sure that there is capacity from the community members to be able to participate in enforcing, as well as ensuring that these policies are implemented. And I think amongst the key areas with issues of informality is the development of the integrated development plans. Because then even in terms of improvement, the communities are going to actually take part in that implementation process. And I think one thing that is missing, and I think this is something that we need to move away as an African continent. We are very good at developing programs, but then we are very poor with monitoring and evaluation. So I think one thing that we need to all focus on is ensuring that we monitor that which we commit to do. And things sometimes don't work as planned, but what is important is to evaluate and then refocus and replan. So I think that's where there is a missing link. And I'm happy that Farai, coming from civil society and through the technical committee meetings, I think these are some of the things that we need to begin to push for the Zambian country, and I think even for the other countries as well, my submission.
Thank you. I see Magdalene looking at me again. I know I have half a second, so let me put it this way. I think the policies are there, but you are right in terms of institutional strengthening for enforcement, but also for bringing the participatory angle to implementation of these policies, because these policies cannot be implemented in a bubble. They cannot be implemented by one side alone. So if there's participation and there's inclusion of the communities, then there's an effective implementation of policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I can see a hand, but we don't. Oh, thank you. Karibu.
The thing of being the last person. But yeah, thank you very much. Mine is a quick one. Let us look at policy as a process, not as a product. And I think this is what we're building also at the JCP Tanzanian team. It's not about the policy as a document, but how did you arrive to the document? What was the process? And I think these are the lessons you can see from other policies as well, where people will sit in rooms, maybe people of this particular profession, one profession or two professions only, producing a document, and it's becoming a national policy. Let us change that mindset from just having certain professions only to develop documents that are going to be used by everyone. With housing, everyone is an actor. Everyone has a role to play. Even those that are not seen as very much professionals, like, for example, media people, you know, the people that produce music, those are very sensitive in communicating the policies, communicating housing challenges. Now, if you may not see documents in Tanzania about housing, but if you listen to Tanzanian music that young people are producing, they will talk about the problem tenants have with landlords. If you know Diamond in Tanzania, he talks about shida na mama mwenye nyumba. He talks about it. Now, professors have done good work, but they're still in shelves, in coded words. But we have this communication expert, I'll call them communication experts, that can communicate well the findings of research. So we need to engage and improve our communication skills. And I think the last thing is this book, FES has produced. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but let me just quickly do it. It's a policy paper we've produced. I'm part of the authors. And maybe we'll also get copies for each and every one of you to see what we've communicated, and it's summarized, but we need to improve how we communicate the findings.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I hear we still need a policy, but we still, we have to invest on the implementation, the execution of the policies, monitoring, evaluations. There are things that we need to also focus on that. We don't have time, I don't know. Probably we are limiting other people to come in. We are limiting. Gender. Please allow me to stop because I can see 3 hands. At least previously it was just 1 hand. So I think you can just maybe meet one of the panelists at the time maybe we close. If possible. I'm so sorry to cut you down, sorry. Yeah, so thank you so much for contribution. Thank you, panelists, for your opinions, and thank you for the contribution.